Apple Knocker Radio.
No, now I remember. So when we talk about the idea that of like you said malleability, I have certain preferences, got to let them go if it's not my right path. What about circumstances where, say somebody's in an abusive relationship, or say somebody is in a totalitarian government or something? I would say that just like that preference is justified, that you want to get out of the abusive relationship or you want to get out from under this tyrannical rule,
and
right?
that's the challenge of the spiritual path, is because people start to say, oh, all my preferences are wrong.
Exactly, man.
Yeah, I'm saying the self-induced preferences that are just creating suffering,
All right.
that's wrong. But sometimes your preferences are just in alignment with survival and truth, right? Let's just say this, there are immortal or universal preferences that run through you, and then there are mind preferences. This is about letting go of the mind preferences, but there's going to be some preferences of saying this is for nothing more than just destruction or separation, and this is in alignment with a greater truth of the universe itself, of how the entire universe runs, right? And sometimes that is a warrior path. Sometimes you could be a person on a battlefield and be more spiritual than any person that's sitting in some sort of monastery. You could have a greater connection to the divine from being a real warrior than you could from being a pacifist, because that person could be identified with being a pacifist. And if you go into nature any day of the week, you're going to see life and death happen based on the law and the cycle of nature and life and death. That's part of it. So that's where religion becomes very confusing. Religion is basically, the way I look at it, is a great place to house spiritual exercises. But once the dogma and the cultural sort of idealism start to integrate in that, then it starts to become confusing, because now they start to throw in some poison words of, oh, here's what you should be and what you shouldn't be, instead of what you naturally are, because there's a whole other political dynamic that goes on there, right? But in the end, that was the most confusing part of the path of integration. And sometimes I found when I had outright war with people, because there was some truth-o-meter in me that realized, okay, this has to happen, and what this person's doing is in direct opposition to this grand happening within me that had nothing to do with mind. It had to do with some dissonance inside me, some dissonance I was feeling that was being falsely created, until I finally had the conversation, the hard conversation, or the hard argument, or the hard conflict. That noise just kept on continuing. And so I had to create a separation from the person's ego, and then a greater love would burst through, and all of a sudden a freedom. It's like, and then there would be this energetic space that was cleared. And then in the end, that person was freer of their own pattern. But they were basically showing me their pattern and then working it out on me. And then I had to basically put a hard line on the sand. Like, I had somebody attack me for not being a vegetarian, right? I said, listen, it doesn't work for me, right? They're like, oh no, you're a bad person because you're not a vegetarian. I'm like, really? I know somebody that would have died if they were a vegetarian, because they had heavy bleeding, fibroids when they're in their 50s after menopause. And the normal supplements of iron and stuff did not work. It was not topping up their iron. They had to have 2 blood transfusions. And only once they started eating liver did they start topping up their iron levels and stuff. And so, without getting into a deep discussion of that, the bottom line is that there's the law of life, and that takes precedent, and it goes way beyond anybody's idealism of whether you should be this or that. And so I know that there's this one guy, he sent me this long email, just, ripping me apart, just using the worst, most destructive words, as you could say. And I was like, sorry, it doesn't work for me. This is, my body just needs certain things. I didn't make my body, somebody else did, and this is it. So 6 months later, I get an email from him and saying, oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. And this is to this guy's credit. Like, what a great person to be able to do this and actually go out of his way and send me an email. He says, I'm sorry, I actually was doing the vegetarian thing. And you know what? All these different health problems started to manifest, and my body was a wreck. Now, whether he was doing it right or wrong, who knows? But the fact that he just used this entire drama that we had as an excuse to let go of a fanatical point of view about something and say, who cares about the idealism? Let's just find out what works. Shows that he was willing to evolve in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, you're going to break everybody's idealism. The more in truth you are, you're going to break your own idealism. So guess what? You're going to break everybody else's too. I mean, there's no template you're going to be able to live, which is why if you read books on the great gurus and stuff, they were terribly frustrating to their students. They were not easy people to get along with. They weren't like all violins and harmony and stuff. One minute they were this, next minute they were that, next minute they were this. It was like life was constantly going through them. And it wasn't mental insanity, because there was also this radiation of this bliss and this peace that was coming from them the whole time. So people are like, I feel like this divine experience, but at the same time, this person's personality is not acting like they're just a personality with A, B, and C options all the time, like the Terminator, right? Guy knocks on the door. Go away, you know what? A, no, F you, asshole, B, and C. You know what I mean? Come in,
Right.
you know, right? So that's the ego. The ego has templates, and who you truly are is the water of life. It's like the Ganges, like the Ganges River in India. You know, the Saraswati, she spits out the water out of Shiva's hair on top of his head. There's this flow of life, and where that flow goes, it isn't your decision. It's just the grand happening. Now, of course, this doesn't give you an excuse to go around abusing people or anything like that. But what I'm saying is because there's some people, this is the other thing that happens. There's some people that spiritually twist all concepts in order to get away with doing whatever they want. There's this chiropractor that actually is in this area, and him and I had some battles because I knew some mutual people that knew him. Anyway, he's in the news right now, and he's a relationship coach. But, you know, he got accused of beating his wife, and then he would use spiritual concepts like, oh, well, you're attracting this because, you know, it's all your karma and stuff, right? You know, these are horrible ways of twisting these spiritual concepts, and they're absolutely false, right? So there is a greater harmony that comes when you come from truth. There may be small conflicts along the way, but what will happen is a greater harmony will be established. So the end goal is that there's this greater sort of law of life that takes precedent instead of people's mind idealisms just banging against each other. I hope that's clear. It's
no, dude, that's I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, because I've spent so much time reading these perspectives, and some of them just logically didn't make sense to me, and it's because it becomes dogmatic, like you just insinuate. It gets to the point where seek love and peace and everything, but it becomes a dogma in itself until it doesn't make any sense anymore. And it's like you just said, I didn't ask to be born in a world where everything has to kill and eat something else. I didn't ask for that, man. Like this is the world I live in. And so, yeah, dude, honestly, I'm kind of, I almost wish we weren't doing this interview, as I would just go sit outside and contemplate what you just said, man. That's profound. And you really gave me a really valuable insight just now. I appreciate it.